What's up, guys? Okay, welcome back. Episode 2, now with an actual name, The Idea Guys.
The Big Idea Guys.
The Big Idea Guys. No longer the Chad cast, although that may remain a segment in the pod. We don't know.
Is that going to be a segment?
I don't know. I'm going to figure it out. Maybe we talk about Bluetooth technologies.
Nice, yeah.
I don't know.
That'll be a reoccurring theme.
Yep. Question. So wait, to kick off this, I had to follow up on something from yesterday. You said Chad was doing something, and he was like, I can't come over and record the podcast yesterday because I'm doing something. And I was like, the thing he was doing that he mentioned, I was like, that seems completely unrelated to what we're talking about. And his answer was, mental models are expensive to build, and I didn't get it. So I'm following up today. What did you mean by that?
I don't really know. I mean, you responded and you're like, is that like a weird way of saying you're in a flow state? And I'm like,
that's what I assume. That's what it sounded like to me. Where it's like, oh, I'm in flow. I don't want to break the flow. That kind of thing.
It depends if that's what you mean by a flow state. I don't necessarily think that like building context around what I'm doing equals flow state. I think that they're like two things that have to happen. It's like I have to be motivated to do a thing.
Okay.
Like the flow state is like, sorry, not motivation. It's like I actually don't need to be motivated. I'm just like intrinsically motivated.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Like I just want it. Like I want to do it, and I'm doing it no matter what is going on around me.
Gotcha. Okay.
But like you like building them as a software engineer when you're working on a problem that requires a lot of context.
Yep.
Getting into the space where that context is available to you and makes sense is not something that can happen in like a 5-10 minute. Sometimes it's like a 25-30 minute thing.
Okay.
And so like to step away or to context switch is expensive because now if I want to return to work on that thing, I have to like rebuild. So
it was almost like a flow state thing then, I guess.
I think
I think that is how I picture flow state. Yeah. Like I start working and like all the things are clicking. Like I have good awareness of what I'm working on and why I'm working on it, and like all of the little variables are making sense.
Yeah, I think you could say that.
And you would call that a mental model.
No, part of it's building. I think I don't think I've considered like the mental model building part of the flow state, because the flow state's what happens after that.
Interesting.
Like,
okay, no, I get what you're saying. So it's like a ramp. You were in the ramp.
Yeah.
To like get into the flow state. Building part of that was building a mental model.
Yeah, and this is always the hardest like spaces to get in as an engineer. Are like, at least for me, I feel like is debugging or fixing old stuff. Because you have to like one, try to remember how did it get in this state, and then if I don't know that, I have to like try to deduce it.
Yep.
And then understand all of like the consequential effects of making a certain change. And it's like, if I change, downstream A and B and then step away, and I'm like, I need to
that for the next time.
And I can make a note like go fix downstream C, but then I have to spend the 35-40 minutes of like building,
getting back into the thing. Okay.
And then you forget stuff that like,
fair.
And if you solved A and B in a certain way with a certain context, and then you step away and you come back, you might solve C in a different way.
Yep.
Or if you do want to solve it in the same way, it's just way harder than to just do it all at once.
Gotcha. Okay.
I think this is why
it didn't make sense to me yesterday. And my exact response was, I don't understand, but I support you. Because I was like, whatever you're doing, that sounds good. I'll just leave you alone.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'm just like super OD about that. But I think all engineers.
No, that's the thing though, is like, I think part of working with engineering is like, when there's something going on, you like don't get in the way.
Sure.
Like that should be your obligation. And part of like the role of product, as I think of it, is like get out of the way and stop other things from getting in the way. So like you should be like preemptively kind of like going ahead and like trying to like pull as much junk out of the like, okay, this could eventually become a thing or become a block or whatever. Because I think like, I don't know, like all the engineers that I really enjoy working with, like that is just like kind of how they operate, is like, I need like 6 hours to sit down and think about this thing.
Yeah.
Like before I can like, decide how to solve it.
Yeah.
So it's just like get the stuff going and like get out of the way. Like you're not I'm not adding value by saying like, no, put down what you're doing and like come over and like record the podcast with
Yeah.
me.
I think especially in a corporate environment, like deep work is a scarce resource.
Seriously.
The availability of deep
Seriously.
work, especially in an in-person office environment.
We should talk about that.
Yeah.
We should talk about that. That is like one of the downsides of like I used to think I was a very like in office type of person.
Yeah.
And then I realized it's just because I like yapping.
No, yeah.
But it's like if I actually want to get work done, the office is usually like the last place I want to be because people are constantly like coming up and like asking you for stuff
Yeah.
or like walking by and like having conversations with you. It's like I literally at work the last 2 weeks what I've been doing is I don't even wear headphones. I use earplugs. I wear like 33 dB earplugs to drown everything out because like that's how hard it is. Like I mean, to what you said, you're like deep work and like getting into a space where like I can focus and like you know like distractions are limited. Like that is like a hard commodity to come by because it's like it's not only like all of the unplanned factors like people walking by your desk and people coming to like talk to you or like people asking you want to go to lunch and stuff like that, but there's like also just a lot of meetings.
Yeah.
And so like you're constantly getting broken up. Your time is getting broken up with like other meetings. Like we have a coworker who we were looking at our schedules last week, and for the last 2 weeks he's been averaging like 20 plus hours a week of just meetings.
It's crazy.
And like I think I sometimes have a lot of meetings, but I was in like less than 14 a week. I think 2 weeks ago I was in 11 hours of meetings, and that's with like multiple engineering teams all having planning. So it's like 8 of those are going to engineering.
Yeah.
But he had like, 20, 21, 22 hours of just meetings.
Jeez.
And I'm like, in a 40-hour work week, dude,
Yeah.
like you get 18 hours of just unadulterated
Yeah.
work time. That's crazy.
And how much of that time is just prepping for the next one?
Exactly. Yeah. You're spending time prepping for meetings and
Yeah. Well, hopefully.
debriefing from meetings. Like,
Hopefully.
yes. Yeah. Hopefully you're prepping for meetings.
And debriefing. Like,
but he was talking about, he's like, most of the time during the meetings, I'm also working.
yeah.
And so I'm like, what is the point of the meeting?
Yeah.
Like at some point, like the meeting is just not useful.
Well,
because
for some business units, that's where deep work, like that is their deep work, is the meeting,
the
I guess.
the non-critical business units.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
So there's like a weird tension there where for some people it's the most important part of the day.
Yeah.
And for other people, it's just the most nuisance part of the day. It's, and it's weird because I think you can develop the skill as a software engineer of like, I can break down any problem into modular components that are, iterable or doable within an hour or 30 minutes. But I feel like you have to do that exercise on every project of like learning how to break it up.
Yep.
And so, recently I've been working on a project I'm fairly new to, and knowing how to break it up is so much harder because, like I said, you have to do that in a new way for every domain and every project that you're, like every workspace that you're in.
Yeah.
At least from the engineering standpoint.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, I mean, if I was to like wrap what we're talking about up, like, I feel like it's kind of what you said with like deep work is a precious commodity and you should prioritize that. And like, I think one of the worst things you can do for your teams is just like have meetings and think that that's productive.
Right.
Like, I think you should have meetings, but only when decisions need to be made that require like whole groups to be there, or there are specific things that you want to achieve. Like I would say if you don't have a clear agenda for the meeting, you're not having a meeting.
Right.
Like, and there's no reason for you to have a meeting without an agenda.
Yeah.
It's like if you ever get in, that's one of my least favorite things that happens is like you get into a meeting and you're 5 minutes in and no one's talking. You're still just kind of like chatting because like no one actually knows who's supposed to be leading the meeting.
Right.
Because like someone else scheduled it, but it's because we wanted to, ask this person some questions. And that just like, that personally just annoys, the crap out of me. Cause I'm like, dude, like this should be maximum 30 minutes. Very few meetings ever have to go more than 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Like come in, ask the questions, like make your decision and then get out. And then like everybody should get back to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just drives me nuts.
Yeah. And it's hard to context switch from
100%.
deep work to a meeting back to deep work.
Yep.
So even if you have 6 hours of deep work in a day and if there's a meeting between those, and that meeting is 30 minutes, you don't have 5.5 hours of deep work.
Yeah, it's like there's gonna be 30 minutes before of like me now thinking about the meeting, and 30 minutes after of me decompressing from being in the meeting. So it's effectively an hour and a half.
Yeah.
I think about like if you have a meeting. I think the worst I've seen is like a meeting. You've got about 30 minutes to an hour break, and then another meeting.
Yeah.
Because then it's just like, oh well, now 3 hours is effectively wasted.
Yeah.
Because like this 1 hour in between, like what am I possibly going to get done? Like I have to find some small tasks like chew on.
Yeah.
Something.
No, I just think it's a hard problem to solve though, because like the collaboration does matter. I think the thing that you get in the workplace you don't get at home does matter. There is value to that collaborative component, and I mean, I love yapping and talking to people, talking shop
as much as the next guy.
And I'm sure anyone that knows me in the workplace would attest to that. But it's hard to, like, I don't know. Do you just say we only have meetings from 9 to 11, like throughout the whole? But like you said, some people that's not enough.
Yeah.
Or maybe it should be enough. And if it's not enough, then we got to figure out what it is you do.
Yeah, I don't know. I think people in general need constraints, which is actually something that we might even get into in this episode later about Linear and like their philosophy behind building. Because we were going to talk about like some culture stuff. But I think it's like a similar idea to like how Linear is like, nope, you're just creating issues. That is like the entity. That is the level at which we operate is like this. So they're like they're putting constraints around you to get you to operate in a certain way. And I feel like putting limits on like when people can have meetings or other things where it's like every meeting has to have an agenda. You had to have sent the agenda out 24 hours before. Yeah. Otherwise there's no meeting. Like as soon as you start to put constraints around stuff, then I think people stop scheduling like the frivolous meetings. Of, like there are certain groups, that I will not name specifically, but I'm like, their whole life to me feels like it just operates around meetings, and they're trying to constantly like schedule new meetings. And I'm like, dude, this is an email at most. Yeah. And like an email with a Loom video. Like that should be the extent of this interaction. But for some reason you want to schedule time with me next Thursday, or like even worse, the potential 30-minute weekly recurring nightmare fuel meeting that I'm like, this is not needed. Yeah. And in some cases it is, but like in a lot of cases it's just not. So I think I love the idea of like put constraints around that stuff. Yeah. But granted, it's like us and most people our age that would be listening to this, we're probably not in the position where we're scheduling most of the meetings. Yeah. We're getting meetings scheduled with us. Yeah. But yeah.
You would think the idea guys would be scheduling more meetings to tell everybody.
No, we don't. No.
I was going to say
why we're so effective.
Well, I mean, looking back at my career and the times when I did like, we need to have a meeting. Like usually in those moments are times where I'm not willing or not able to figure something out. And I am now putting the burden
I'm distributing the load.
Yeah, and it's like sometimes you have to do that because it's either not your responsibility or not your role to figure that thing out, and you need to, recruit the help of someone else to fix it.
Call me ELB the way I be elastically balancing these loads.
Yeah, but I think sometimes that's how I feel when I go to meetings. Is like, like now this is on me. Or I can recognize sometimes where I'm like, oh shoot, I'm putting this on someone else, even though like I should probably just have figured this out. Yeah. Or I should still continue to figure this out. And I think that's what an agenda helps do, is it helps show the person who you're like recruiting the help of, like, I'm still willing to do some work to figure this out. Yeah. I'm not just like dumping this on you and expecting you to solve it,
Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. Okay. Good talk there. That was a semi-unplanned topic. We actually did want to jump into potentially one of our first recurring segments that we wanted to introduce to the pod, which I don't actually even have a name for.
Good cop, bad cop?
Good cop, bad cop. Basically.
For products.
Yeah, good cop, bad cop, but for, it could be, I think products, philosophies, like, like methodologies, anything like that. So Chad and I operate in very like software worlds, and so we're constantly trying out like new tools and like other fun things. And obviously, like once you get involved in that sort of stuff, it leads you down into other like new tools. For example, like Arc is the one that I'm going to talk about today, Arc and Dia, and it's like Arc is just a browser, but I think like as soon as you start like getting down that like new tool train, then it's like you're constantly just like discovering new things that are like, this is also like a fun little tool that you could use. Yeah. So basically in this good cop bad cop segment, This week I'm gonna be the bad cop. Chad's gonna be the good cop.
I'll try my best.
But I'm going to bring up something I really don't like, whether that be an application or a methodology or a philosophy, something related to that. And then Chad is going to bring up one that he really likes, and we're both just gonna like talk about it, have some conversation in regards to that, and we'll see where it goes. So I'm happy to go first because I love a good rant, and this week is a great week to rant. So for those of you who haven't used it, there's a browser called Arc, made by the Browser Company out of New York. Incredible browser, super fun to use. For those of you who are still on like Chrome or Firefox or Safari, or maybe you've like gone up and what's that, like Brave? That's a browser, right? DuckDuckGo
or
like,
Opera.
Yeah, Opera. Like Opera's crazy.
Yeah.
If you're using Opera.
Yeah, I was there once. I gave it a whirl before Arc, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so like there's like plenty of browsers. Arc to me had like a really refreshing spin on it, and there was a couple things I really liked, and I'm going to talk about those just to set the stage for how epically terrible Dia is. And that's what I'm going to be bad copping about. But Arc, so I was originally introduced to Arc by Chad.
Let's go.
And he, was like playing around with it, sent me like an invite code or whatever, and then like I started using it, and it was really cool. Like I can try and I'll show some screenshots like right here what Arc looks like for those of you who aren't familiar. But I think like there probably were some technical benefits in terms of I don't know like speed and like how much like memory consumption, that kind of stuff. I wasn't super aware of it. I'm just like a general consumer, and I just thought it looked sick, and it does. It looks great. They had done some really cool stuff with the design of the browser that made it really enjoyable to use. And a couple key things that I want to call out about it that I loved, absolutely loved. It was they had really good keyboard shortcuts, especially one where I could like open up tabs next to each other. It's like unlike most traditional browsers where everything kind of runs horizontally, right? So you have like the search bar at the top, and you have like your individual tabs all running horizontally. If I want to open a new tab, then it like I have to click over into it. Arc was really good about like everything kind of ran vertically, and I could also interact with multiple tabs at the same time. So like I think it's Control Option equals or something opens up like a tab next to my tab in the same window, and I can have basically two windows open at once. Whereas like with Chrome, to my knowledge, what you would have to do is like create a new window and then split that basically and have them both going full screen.
Yeah.
So like I have to have two windows of Chrome open, but for Arc I could do it both within the same thing. So I love that. That is literally the feature I probably use the most, is that Control Shift E or or Control Shift equal, whatever the command is. The other one I really loved was like Command T for search, which I think is actually like a common thing in browsers. Like I think you can probably do that in Safari too.
Like new tab.
Yeah, but it had never been exposed to me in a way that like felt good and made sense.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden I was using Arc, and it's like everything was just like clicking. So like I think as a browser experience, like it felt very fluid. And I'm probably like picking up like the most ground level, low hanging fruit things. Like I was probably getting 10% of the value out of Arc as other people were. But like it just felt so clean and so smooth to use.
Yeah.
And they had a really dedicated following. If you look at them on like Reddit or Twitter, like people loved Arc. Arc was super good. And then venture capital struck. So the browser company went out and got funding, or took on investor money.
I can't remember if this was, I don't know if they were already funded pre-Arc or after.
Maybe, yeah.
But like, how do you make money on a browser?
It was free. Yeah.
It's like a public utility at this point.
Yeah.
It's just a given. So maybe I get it. Anyways.
I don't get it. And that's what I'm upset about. Is they had this great thing. They had people that loved it. Like, I think it was really picking up usage. Like there were people, it used to be, at least at our company, like there was a handful of people that used it. I think Chad was one of the first ones that was using it. And then it slowly started to spread. You could see more and more people using it. But now people are joining the company and they already use it. So like I knew why us internally use it. It's because we all talked about it.
Yeah.
And like all of a sudden other people started coming and they already knew what it was.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, like more and more people are starting to know what Arc is. So basically they take on some venture money, and they release this announcement that they're going to start a new browser called Dia. And it is just like complete AI schlop. Like it is possibly the biggest downgrade I think you could ever do. And their whole pitch was just like, oh, we have this thing, and like we want to make the way that you interact with AI on the internet completely different.
Yeah.
And I think as an ideal, as like a goal, I'm like, that's really cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. I would love to like have, leverage AI more fully actually in my workflow when I'm doing most of my work in the browser.
Yeah. When I watched the marketing video like a few months ago, I was like, whoa.
It makes a ton of sense.
I was like, wait.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, why is this not already there?
Yeah.
Ooh, someone's missing out on doing this. There are plenty of opportunities already to do this. How does it not exist?
Yep.
I was like pretty bullish on it.
Yeah. But what do you think of? We'll talk about that. What do you think of when you think of like AI introduced into your workflows, like as far as the browser goes? Like what would make a lot of sense for you? Maybe they can actually take this
I think that what I liked about the video is I didn't know that I wanted that.
Yeah. It was very Apple.
But then maybe that's a problem. I don't know. Like they were the way that they were presenting, the motion graphics that they have, whether or not those were real or animated. I was like, oh yeah, like it just knows the context of my screen. It was the same way I felt about Apple Intelligence when it was announced.
When that was announced?
I was like, oh yes, like obviously the smart context gathering just in my normal day-to-day use. That's the thing that's like I'm looking for.
Yep. And I think within the browser, because I think that is like a huge gap in like the AI workflow that is like currently like I think as soon as you introduced like MCP and like the open source stuff like N8N or whatever, like more agentic stuff, like it started to make like kind of bring your tools that were once separated closer together, and you could interact with all of them through like whatever model you were using. And like I think it makes a lot of sense, like you were saying with like Apple Intelligence. It's like, oh yeah, I should have something on my phone that can interact with all of the context that exists on my phone, like my messages and my photos, like all of these things that like that Apple already had on the thing, right? The browser is very similar to where like what would really help my workflow is if like whatever model I'm using can just use the context that's currently on my screen instead of me opening up the ChatGPT app and then typing stuff into it and having to repeat what's already on the screen or like take screenshots and stuff. Like it should already know like what's here.
Yeah.
So I think as like a goal, it was really, really cool. However, the implementation was just absolute dog crap.
You're talking about Dia?
Dia. It was the worst. It's the worst. And like, so they rolled out basically all of the cool stuff that they had done that brought like a, kind of a following over to Arc, like made it really fun to use, made it really smooth, made it look really good. It was visually very interesting. They just ditched.
Yeah.
And so they basically rebuilt a Chrome browser, right? We just like everything was completely normal. And then they just added on these kind of like gimmicky AI layers on top of it, where it's like, I can, I have a keyboard shortcut to ask questions about what's on the page. And I'm like, I could already do this.
Yeah.
Like there are Chrome extensions that already did this.
Yeah.
Or worst case scenario, I already have the ChatGPT app installed on my computer and I can like run it there. And so like it felt like the implementation was just like so weak. And like it wouldn't have been that bad had they just said, we are building Dia and Arc simultaneously. Yeah. But that's not the messaging they've given. The messaging they've given is like, we are actually completely dumping Arc.
Yeah.
And like it will still be usable, but we're not going to continue like building new stuff for it. And we're going to focus all of our efforts on Dia.
Well, watching the interview, so the CEO of the browser company did an interview with MKBHD. It was actually part of their Waveform podcast. And in that interview, he tried to make it very clear that they're not going to not support Arc.
Yeah.
But like that's the extent of it is, in quality of life improvements are going to be marginal, and everything from here on out is just making sure that it continues running with the latest Chromium and security and that kind of thing. So he's like, it'll still exist, it'll still be a thing, but it's almost like he was talking about it as if it reached an end. Like Arc is a finished product almost. And like everything from here on out will not be feature set, it'll just be support.
Which I think it was. Like I loved it the way it was. There's not much more that I would ask for from Arc. But I think like the big things that aggravated me so much was just like one, I surface level implementations of AI just bug the heck out of me if you're going to use that as like a marketing point.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're going to talk about how If you're going to talk about how your product is an AI first product, how like it's all, slapped all over your marketing copy on your website, it's like AI, it better be something really stinking cool.
Yeah.
Like make it something that I'm like, wow, this actually 10x'd my life. Like this is really, really cool. And some tools definitely accomplish that. However, what Dia had done was basically just like, instead of you having a separate app where I can interact with ChatGPT, I now have an in-app version.
Yeah.
And like that really to me was like the only change. And then you just stripped out all of the cool aesthetic stuff that I actually liked.
Yeah.
And like it just felt like it was a poor, I don't know, it was a poor go at it. So I think the surface level implementation was definitely like a huge one for me. And there was a second thing I was going to bring up, but I'm forgetting right now. So maybe if you
was it about the onboarding experience?
Oh yeah, the onboarding was crazy. the onboarding. That was the one thing, Dia, that you got right. And it was somehow they like when you open up the browser for the first time, it like hacks your whole screen, and it like
it's actually
does
so
this.
sick.
It does this full screen. Like I wouldn't be surprised if there was like haptic feedback on my computer, like the whole thing is
coming through the keyboard.
It's like a 4D experience. Like. You open it up and it really was like a very, very cool unboxing, which is odd for software that you like.
Totally.
You don't think of like unboxing software, but I'm like, that was an unboxing
experience.
Maybe that's something that people should play more to is like, I felt excited to use it for about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
and then as soon as I started like actually working with it, I was like, oh, this is actually like complete garbage. I think the second thing, maybe this is the only other point I'll call out that really, really ticked me off is Chad and I were talking about this week, and he was saying, I think it was from that Waveform podcast. You mentioned like they took away a lot of the cool aesthetic stuff that we liked from Arc because the CEO was like, well, we want to make AI more approachable. We want to get AI all the way out to like your grandma.
Right. Which
I'm like, awesome. What a cool idea. That's very nice of you to think my grandma would ever want to use the internet. Like, that's awesome.
Like at all.
Yeah. Like she doesn't care. But then what was funny is I was like, that would make a lot of sense if you hadn't run the beta the way that they did. Their beta was only rolled out to students.
Right.
So it's like, oh, so do you care about grandmas? Do you care about like all these other people? Because it seems like you just only cared about the students, right? You're kind of like aiming for that younger demographic. So I'm like, I think to me, like Dia just seems like this poor kind of like slapped together VC thing that's like, we got money. They wanted us to do something with AI. And here's what we got.
Yeah.
And then,
I'm confused because I'm still trying to figure out where this makes money, where Arc couldn't.
Yeah.
Because I think Arc was also. Do you remember when they did like the whole Max thing?
Yes. I think that's another point that it's like everything that you just did in Dia could have been built into Arc.
Yeah. It did. Actually, kind of crazy. I feel like Arc Max was Perplexity before Perplexity.
I didn't use ArcMax that much.
Okay.
The most I ever used was the Command F that could like search and summarize the page.
Yeah, so you could do basically generative search
on the
phone,
the mobile.
Yeah, and I think they had that. Oh, it was just the mobile, huh?
Yeah, but I think Perplexity had already been around at that point. But
maybe I just didn't know about it. But that was another use case where I was like, wow. I like search restaurants, top 10 restaurants, and you get a curated markdown document instead of just search results on Google.
And that's actually a really good point. Yeah, that was cool about Arc Mobile was that you could, it would say they would generate you your own web page is what they would call it. And so like you would type in the question, then it would be like, cool, generating your web page, and it would show you the different sources that they're pulling from. So
maybe that just didn't monetize well, but I guess I'm confused why this couldn't be taken to the next level.
I think that seems to be the most common question I've seen on Reddit is like everything that you just built could have been built into Arc.
Sure.
And it doesn't make sense why you spun up this entirely new platform to do it when Arc was already like Arc already had an audience. Dia didn't.
Yeah.
And now you're trying to force this audience for Dia, which I'm like, yeah, for a bunch of students that you ran this beta for, like I'm sure it was mildly interesting.
Yeah.
But like even for them, I would ask them like, is it actually that much better than whatever workflow you were using before? Or is this just the first time that you've had AI in your workflow?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, yeah, it's better than nothing, but it's not that much better than everything else that already existed.
Yeah. And maybe it'll get better. I think they did say it's beta right now. I mean, I downloaded it like 5 days ago and I'm already forgetting. But it did feel like
it was forgettable.
And he mentioned in the podcast, like there will be more. So hopefully this is the worst Dia we get.
I sure hope so. That was disappointing.
Yeah. But great onboarding. Really cool. Onboarding.
Incredible onboarding. That was, you get major. Whoever did that one.
Yeah.
Good for you. That was a great experience.
Yeah.
Okay. That's enough of the bad cop side. I've just been complaining.
No, it's all good.
We can jump over to good cop.
Yeah.
What's something that you
I don't think I told you what I was going to talk about.
No, I have no. This will be news to me.
It probably won't be. It's Apple Music. And I feel like everybody's probably like, what in the world?
We live in a different world. It's 2025. Spotify is not the leader anymore.
Okay, and I do have to be a little bit of a bad cop to talk about why I'm the good cop this week.
You got to set it up.
Spotify switched the library and ad button a month ago, and ever since then, I've had a really bad taste in my mouth.
Dumbest decision I think you ever could have made.
And I don't know what happened. Maybe this is more in exposure of my follies as a consumer, but like ever since then, I can't help but find things I don't like about Spotify. It was like, you get the ick and now everything's
icky.
Wait a second, this app sucks.
That was, I think I'm before Chad gets into the rest of this, that was the dumbest thing.
And nothing was said.
No product designer told you don't do that. The button that everyone's been hitting their entire life on Spotify?
Yeah.
Don't move that.
Yeah.
Right?
Like thing that's like when I'm holding it one-handed, that's exactly where I go.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's been a month or more, and I still like click it, unclick, and then I'm like it's so muscle memory.
Yeah.
Which says something about how much of it. Like I was a pretty heavy Spotify user.
Years. I've probably been on Spotify 10 years.
But that alone, I guess this is what's hard about consumer applications is like this seems like a pretty frivolous thing, but that alone got me looking.
It matters. It definitely matters. And like the other thing that ticked me off was what they replaced it with.
Like create.
You replaced it with I think there is an argument for yes, put the primary action that your users make on your platform in the most easy to access place, right? Mm-hmm. This is exactly what we did with Bookends.
Yeah.
Where it's like everyone's always adding something, adding a session, adding a book, adding whatever. So we just added this plus button in the bottom right.
Yeah.
And I'm I think there's a strong argument for that. But Spotify, the primary action I'm doing is listening.
Yeah.
It's not starting a jam.
Yeah.
It's not adding a playlist. I do that sometimes.
Yeah.
Right? It's 99% of the time I'm getting on there to listen to something.
Right.
I had the library button and you took it from me.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
Okay, continue.
Anyways, we were watching WWDC last week, which maybe we'll talk about later. Liquid glass.
Liquid glass. If you know what we're talking about.
And there was they were showing features of Apple Music, and they weren't life-changing features. It was just little stuff, and I was like, oh. And then we had a coworker in the room, Jake.
Yes,
thank you,
Jake
who was hyping up Apple Music, and I've had a few other people. Parker has mentioned things that he likes about Apple Music. Yeah, and then someone else mentioned you get monthly Wrapped on Apple Music, and then you can refer back to the monthly Wrapped.
It's so much better.
So there was a combination of things where I was looking over the fence, and then of course they give you 3 months free.
3 months free.
So there's no cost to try it out. And I tried it out. And the simple thing that I just want to talk about how much I love is that they do actually differentiate. I think there are differentiating factors, even though it's a music app.
Interesting. Okay.
And I was actually talking to my dad about this.
Okay.
The way he listens to music is similar to the way I listen to music, which is discography style. So
okay. I
want to listen to an album. I actually want to listen to the 12 songs on the album. Maybe I skip one, but I'm very much a by artist, by album listener. Occasionally playlist.
Yep.
Usually depending on my environment, I'll throw on a playlist if I'm on a drive with friends or at the gym maybe. But usually in my day-to-day work, in my casual listening, I'm I'm going to listen to this artist today or right now. And I feel like Apple Music makes that experience really nice. The library, the granularity of the library optimizes and indexes on the artists and their albums and not your playlists. Playlists are an afterthought, whereas on Spotify, that's the core entity of everything. Anyways, so it's if you do discography style listening, it's not that you can't get that on Spotify, but that's more of a secondary experience.
Yep.
And Spotify's all about adding and following playlists. The other thing I was worried about, so I was concerned about losing some things when I switched over to Spotify. was like the Made for You playlist. I do like Discover Weekly and Release Radar. Apple Music has that, and their recommendations were solid. Like, I clicked one song, and this was also not inside those playlists, but their recommendation engine. I like clicked one song that I wanted to listen to in the car and forgot to queue up like a playlist.
But it's almost good. You get 30 minutes into it and you're like, wait a minute.
And I was like, wait, this is so cohesive. They've got cool blend features that they announced.
You gotta talk about the blend.
Yeah, the blend is cool. It doesn't work every time, but occasionally there was a few songs on that drive where I was like, wait, that was perfect. And it felt like a DJ experience a little bit. It felt like a good radio station. But yeah, like the recommendations were good. The visuals are good. I like that. And this is silly. I like that I can get full screen album art, or at least partially full screen album art while I'm listening. It's just that next level native experience that makes it nice.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, you heard it here. I mean, I'm close to switching. I think like after Spotify just botched Wrapped so horrifically bad last year.
Yeah.
And I think that's, to me, that was like the inflection point. Is like I'm seeing more people switch over to Apple Music. I don't know if that is rooted in truth or not. I have no numbers on like what the migration has been.
Yeah.
But for me personally, like that experience of last year's Wrapped alone changed my sentiment of Spotify, because I was like, before it was almost like they had out Appled Apple, like in a sense that like long time ago, right, when it was like Apple versus Windows, they come out with that 1984 commercial, and it was like 1984 won't be like 1984 if you're with Apple, because like we're the new hot thing, we're for creators, we're for like the renegades, like all that stuff, right? And to me, that's what Spotify kind of felt like. It was like this dark horse kind of thing where it was like, we're the underdog, you know, we've got something to prove, we care about, you know, like you as a listener and all this stuff. And then to me, that just fell apart at the end of 2024. And it was like, oh, wait a minute, you actually don't care about me as a listener at all.
Yeah.
And then what I've seen on the other side of the fence is the inverse of that with Apple Music, where it's like, it's actually continued to get better and better and better. And then in this most recent release for WWDC, I was like, dude, this looks way better. Yeah. Like, this looks just actually like something I would want to use.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, frustrating
as it is. Also, now they have the whole new UI with like liquid glass. So it just looks better, period.
Liquid glass.
WWDC
was crazy, man.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if we're wrapping up good, bad, bad, good cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
Good,
I think that's good. I mean, if you could summarize, what do you think are like the one or two key features for you on Apple Music? Like if you were to compare and contrast that with Spotify, like what's like these two things like puts Apple Music ahead of Spotify for me?
The library is catered towards your artists and their albums.
I have heard that. Jake Richards, if you can hear us, talks to me about that all the time. He's like, Spotify doesn't have libraries.
Yeah,
like, it does. It's got playlists.
You can have a library in Spotify, but it's nested. It's like a secondary experience,
and it's only if you add it.
Yes,
like I have to hit the plus button.
Yeah. And I think I still have to do that with Apple Music.
Oh,
but like the way I listen into it, it's been like 4 days, so maybe there's more for me to figure out. But the way I intuitively listen is I go to my library and it's like, oh, I can either shuffle everything, or I can shuffle within an artist, or I can shuffle within an album.
Okay, fair enough.
And I think I like that granularity.
Okay,
I don't need a playlist.
Yeah,
my playlist could be, you know, like I said, I listen to an album, or I listen to an artist, or I just want to listen to probably everything. You still can create playlists. And there's some cool tools out there for you to be able to like sync your playlist from Spotify to.
You'll have to put me on whatever you used.
Yeah.
I want to try it.
It had like a 200 song limit. That was the only bummer. You have to pay for it if you want over 200 songs. The one I used, I was like looking up open source alternatives, but then got frustrated. So
there's gotta be.
But then that's when I was like, wait, I don't even really.
Can you just build that?
Yeah, I mean, I found an open source one, but like I spent 15 minutes and I was like, you know. I just split up my 300 song playlist into two 150s, and then we were done.
Is that all you had?
Yeah, I don't really use playlists like at all.
Oh, that's crazy.
Like I genuinely, I have like one playlist, and it's just all my liked songs.
Yeah, you only have 300 liked songs
right now. I clean it out. Like it's like an ongoing curated playlist of like.
That's crazy.
Every like 3 or 4 months, it'll like grow, and then I'll be like, wait, not my vibe anymore, and I'll like remove some. And
my liked is probably like 4,500 songs.
Jeez.
So that's why I'm like, I'm not moving that over 200 songs at a time.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, you can just pay for this tool.
I'm not paying no one. I'm paying $0 for that. I'll just cut over.
I am a little sad. I guess the cost here is like, I know Spotify does. This is what you listened to in 2019. And I guess I'm giving that up a little bit.
Yeah. But it's like then, I mean, in 3 years, you're going to have it back. Because they'll just be able to say, this is what you listened to in 2025.
It's a long time, though.
Yeah. But I don't know.
And like today, I regret not using Spotify in high school. Because like sometimes I'm like, wait, what was I listening to? You know, what would give me like 2016 vibes other than just like Drake?
I have, I might be too young. I have, I used to do playlists every month in high school. Like I would do, like this was, May 20.
So you have all your high school Spotify history?
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
Dude, that's like the equivalent of like.
It's like
I also deleted like all of my photos from high school. I don't know.
Can we?
It wasn't. I don't think this was an intentional thing. I think I just lost it. But
hold up, I'm just gonna pull it up, and we're gonna move on to the next section. But I do want to see what's back.
Jeez.
Here. Let's see.
Talk about playlists.
January. Okay, so some of these aren't even in high school. Interesting, because I've got some. January 2019. I already know this is going to be garbage. Oh, gosh. John Bellion, which is not bad.
So just as much as there's like the potential nostalgia factor, there's also the potential cringe factor
yeah, I'm actually
of looking back.
Okay, look at this one. This is like, do you know this song? Oh, it's okay. We shouldn't even talk about this on the podcast. This is embarrassing. Either way. Anyway, so I will be cutting over to Apple Music just to completely forget that ever happened.
A crazy feature they announced at WWDC, and I've been telling everybody about this because my wife loves karaoke, is on if you have a third generation Apple TV and an iPhone with Apple Music,
okay,
you can turn on karaoke mode on the TV and it'll cut the lyrics, and then you can use your iPhone as a microphone. So you basically get a full karaoke setup just with Apple Music and the latest software.
Dang.
And given you have to have the iPhone and the Apple TV, which is like $1,000 at least.
Yeah.
But,
so, yeah.
But chances are you already have it.
Check your privilege. Check your privilege. No, my friend actually built an app that does karaoke, but it also uses it measures like your pitch accuracy.
Oh, so it's like Guitar Hero style.
It's an additional like layer on top of it.
Nice.
I texted her as soon as I saw that announcement. I was like, "Hey, is this like the same thing?" And she was like, "Well, ours also has like like the pitch accuracy, which is like part of the game."
Nice
kind of stuff. But
nice.
All right. Enough good cop, bad cop. That's great stuff. We're gonna jump into our next segment, talking about company culture.
Nice.
And I'm happy to kick this off, and I'm sure Chad's got plenty of thoughts. Chad's been going through a lot of stuff past week and a half, so I'm sure he's got thoughts. But as I was thinking about this, and I think there are takeaways here for, I guess I'll talk about our experience here at Bookends, and like just in projects that you and I have worked on together, and then contrast that with like what our experiences have been like at corporate, and like you'll have some like from previous companies and stuff like that. But the more that I think about this, one of the things that is interesting to me is all companies have this outwardly facing quote unquote culture. And that is kind of like what you see about them online, right? So it's like when you walk into a company, like you can imagine you'll have like, the 10 values of the company, on a poster on the wall, right? Or like during the interview process, maybe someone asked you like, oh, like which of the values is your favorite? And how do you feel like you embody that value or something like that? And I think the funniest thing about this to me is that those values have so little to do with literally anything, like most of the time.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it is
signaling.
So it's so interesting to me that like somewhere along the line, someone told companies that this is like a good idea for you to do this. And I don't think it's not. I think it is actually a good idea. I think it is implementations of it that go wrong, because to me, like the culture only matters. Like really the culture is like, it is the way that your employees interact with and the things they believe about each other and themselves. I would say like that to me is culture.
Oh, interesting.
Because like, so for example, if you say like almost all companies, and I'm not even calling out like the one that we currently work at, because like I think a lot of companies have this as a value, is like some variation of the words data driven.
Yeah.
something like that. Like 50-60% of companies
Yeah.
all have some variation of data driven,
Mhm.
either that or like innovate relentlessly.
Yeah.
Like there's just like something like that. And then you actually get into the ground floor, you know, in the trenches working on product. And it's like, wait a minute, this isn't data driven at
Yeah.
all. Like it's just this like thing that like the company likes to imagine about themselves. But then you start actually like working with people and it's like they may or may not actually reflect those values.
Right.
And so that's why I think I'm like, what really matters to me when I talk about like company culture, it's like, what do the employees believe about themselves and how do they interact with each other? Because like, if we're talking and like we're working together on something and I am like, you know, let's say you propose a solution and then I'm kind of like, you know, digging into it. I'm like, oh, like, do we have more data on this thing? Like, can you somehow figure out like, I don't know, like, can you run some queries to determine like whether this is the direction we should go or whether this is the direction we should go or something like that? Then I'm like, to me, that is data driven, but that's at the level of like you and me operating with each other.
Yeah.
Like the HR department has nothing to do with that.
Right.
You know, whatever, or the recruiters, you know, whatever they publicly presented on the website about like our company. Right. And so like, it's kind of up to the people at the ground level to make that culture feel real and actually get it applied into different things.
Yeah.
There's a CEO of a company here in Utah called Leland.
Hmm.
His name's John Koliker, if I pronounce the last name right. And he posted something really cool about his experience at Uber and how Uber was actually like the antithesis of what I think of as corporate culture. Where like corporate culture to me is like we put all the values on a wall and we don't actually care about those things literally ever.
Mhm.
Like SAP's motto is the best run. Like what does that even mean, first of all? And also, it's definitely not the best run. I work there and it's not. Like it's actually not.
Yeah.
And that's like no slight against like people that I used to work with. Like I love the people that I worked with, but it just felt like there wasn't that much direction.
Right.
And also it is like a big company. But John's experience at Uber was like they had 14 values, which is a ton, like way more values than I can constantly like keep track of in my own head. But he was like, it is those 14 values are the screensaver of every TV. Like anytime that thing is not in use, is showing those. He's like, they're constantly talked about in meetings. They're constantly talked about in one-on-ones. They're constantly talked about all over the place. And so I'm like, okay, there you have like really, really good company culture where people are actually acting and looking to action on those values, which I think is like a rare thing, at least in my experience in like corporate America.
You said I keep thinking about what you said about how it's really your culture really is reflected in the way your employees work together.
Yeah.
And I think that makes sense. And I'm not quite sure I have something to add to that other than that is a hard thing to direct.
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying that this is an easy problem to solve by any means. I think we're just recognizing that like we're actually recognizing that it isn't an easy problem, that it is a hard problem.
Yeah.
But that there are certain things you can do, like you mentioned with Uber, to help facilitate that a little bit. It has to be talked about. It has to be communicated. It has to be referenced. And the only way you get people to do that is to incentivize them.
Yep.
There has to be a symbiotic relationship between the employee and the employer. Otherwise, you don't get buy-in.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to contribute to said culture if I feel like I'm not getting anything out of it, you know? I want to be just as much a consumer of the culture as I do want to be a contributor of the culture. And the only way to get to that point is for, like I said, that relationship to be symbiotic. And I think that's where things can get rough, is like companies can want an environment to be a certain way. But if the relationships between them and their employer is not symbiotic, it's not healthy, it's not, mutually beneficial, then I doubt you're going to get buy-in. You know, people aren't going to want to be data driven if they're not being rewarded for being data driven.
Yep.
To some degree.
Correct. And I think that's probably one of the challenges is like, how do you motivate people to bring that into their like day-to-day operations and stuff like that? I'll tell you what the answer is not. The answer is not. Although company barbecues are great, company barbecues do very little for company culture. Right? I strongly believe that. Like fun like events and things like that, I'm like, they are cool. They are cute. I have a very like I don't know if maybe traditional is the right word. I don't know this, or like I want to say masculine, but I'm like I don't know if that's the right term for this. but like to me, the relationships between your employees, which again, like to me, that is like the outcome you want when you're talking about culture, is like I want this to foster some sort of to actually change the way that my company interacts with itself.
Yeah.
Like when we're working on a project, I want these values to embody, the final thing that we get out into the world. Like to me, that happens when your employees actually work together on hard problems and like solve hard problems.
Yeah.
Like I'm very service oriented, and I'm like, I think you get to know people the best when you actually go out and do like it sounds cringy, but like a service project or something. It's like, let's go do like let's go, clean up someone's yard or clean up someone's house. Like, I think I know people, like I have learned a lot more about people doing that sort of thing than I have going to a barbecue.
Yeah.
Because like a barbecue is just like small talk, and like I never know, like I don't actually leave most of the time. I don't leave knowing, anything more about you.
Right.
But like if we go into an environment where it's like, oh, we actually got to work pretty hard on something, I learn a lot about you. I learn about how you resolve conflict. I learn about how like what your work ethic is like. I learn about like deeper things than what you like on your cheeseburger.
Yeah.
And so like like I don't know, to me I think that is like a key component of building good culture, is like getting your employees to know each other on that level and operate with each other on that level, which I think has been one of the cool things about Bookends. And like, granted, our culture is a lot easier to control. And one, we never even outlined a culture. Like, we don't have values or anything like that. But I think it's because like, I know you're constantly working on stuff, and hopefully like Chad gets the impression that I am also like working on stuff and like thinking about like how the product should operate and stuff like that. And so like, because of that, like I learned a lot about like Chad. And I think there's like intangible benefits to the relationship. Like it helps build trust and like all of these things that like, it's not an on paper benefit, but because we're working on a hard problem together, like the camaraderie and like all that stuff just kind of like grows. And so I think what you would want, at least what I would want, is like, I want to put as many of my employees in a space like that as possible, with as many people as possible. Like mix and match them and get them to like solve different problems and work together in these different things, because then like the company as a whole is kind of like growing closer together, and you guys are like trusting each other more and that kind of stuff.
Totally.
So it's just like very, I don't know, that's my 2 cents on it.
Yeah. If that's the case, then I would imagine that companies with the worst culture, and I don't know that I can answer this, but if we were to take that thesis to the extreme, companies with the worst culture are the ones that silo people.
Absolutely.
So it's like, anytime there's organizational or departmental conflict and like barriers of communication, you probably have a lack of culture.
Yes. Yeah. One of my least favorite things is like, silos is such an interesting word, because it's almost like a corporate buzzword. Everyone loves to talk about like, we build bridges, not silos. And I'm like, that may or may not be true. I think you just like to say that. Yeah. Like, I don't actually know that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like one of the least fun things is, and I think this is a takeaway for anyone working in any position, is like, I think you should be excited when someone else comes and like wants to operate in your domain, and you shouldn't shut them down. And like, I've had experiences in the past where like I wanted to go do something, but because it was someone else's job, they were like, you can't do that thing. That's my thing. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I thought, aren't we all doing this? We're all doing this together. Right. Like, why? Like, I can think about this too.
Right.
Like, I think from the product perspective, it would be like, I don't allow my engineers to create tickets because that's my job. I'm the ticket guy. Right. I create all the tickets. Like, you are engineer. You go code monkey. Idea guys talk.
You're saying if you were to do that, that would be
that's what to me that would look like. Is if I was to apply that same philosophy of like, you can't do stuff that's my job, it'd be like, no, don't create your own tickets. Like, I have to do that for you. And I think that's in product. I'm like, that is one of the worst things you could possibly ever do, right? Because like a lot of your good ideas are coming from people who are not you, right? Whether it be like sales or customer success or engineering, because they're taking different spins at the product and looking at it in different ways. And it's just like,
I think you can get into that state by either one, gating it, like you're saying, or siloing it, like not allowing it, or not incentivizing people.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to try to do something that's not my job if there isn't a benefit to doing that, whether that benefit is financial or, other satellite benefits drinks,
Yeah.
food, activities,
Yoga classes.
or improved relationships, or better learning opportunity,
Yep.
and career development. Like if there's not a symbiosis there, it's just not going to happen. Like people aren't going to do more than what they need to if there's not an upside.
Yeah, agreed. I guess if you were to say you're going to start a company, how do you think you would go about introducing something like this?
Yeah,
introducing good culture.
I think it's easy to talk about in environments that exist and harder in this context.
When you're
when one, you're the one that it's relying on,
Yeah.
and two, it doesn't exist yet. So you literally have to try to just ideate it.
We've been hating, but it is a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
This is a very hard thing to do.
I think that I think I lean more towards the side of like when you're small, just make it organic. Like I'm not sure that you need to write it down like with bookends, right? Now, I don't think that can happen in every case because like we were friends before that happened. So like the culture was just the friendship.
Yeah.
And so if that's not already there, then maybe, it does need to be talked about a little bit on like, here's the things we care about. I think what I've enjoyed doing in small, like experimental environments is finding, I guess, leaders in that space or examples as inspiration.
Oh.
There's a word I can't think of right now, like a role model. So like finding another company where you feel like they nailed it, either because someone has said to you that worked there, or the other thing you're indexing on, you really love their product, or you really love the experience as a customer. I don't think that always means that the company's run very well, but I think it's hard for a company that's not run well to produce good stuff.
Good product. Yeah. Although, I mean, Amazon. Average churn under 2 years over at Amazon.
Yeah.
Open it out.
Yeah. I don't know that there's always a correlation there, but that's my first thought. I don't think I have like a super obvious answer, but the first thing I would do is look for inspiration.
Yeah. I'm big on, I think the one thing that comes to me very strongly, and like I mentioned this, about 10 minutes ago, but like putting people in a position where they can work together to solve a hard problem. And then I think using whatever values you want to have as a backdrop to that. And like, I think it's much easier to control in a smaller environment like what we have, where it's just like it's 2 people working on a thing, or like maybe it's less than 10 people, right? Like startup culture is very fun because that environment is very easy to control and participate in, and like all of those other things that we've talked about. As soon as you get into larger organizations, it's harder to maintain that across business units. Which again, like I don't know whose assignment that is. There's no like chief culture officer, but like maybe there should be a chief culture officer that can just help people like cross functionally, work to embody those values. Because I do think what we say, and like to me, a lot of what companies say is just like virtue signaling of like, oh yeah, we're data driven, we are innovative, like whatever. And it's like whether or not you actually are, like I don't know, right? And we don't know, but like I think those values themselves are important. It is important to be data driven. It is important to be innovative and like try and think of new ways to address problems. And so again, like what we're coming back to is just how do you actually implement the thing? And I don't know that there is like a perfectly clear cut answer for that. I think what I would want people to be wary of, like if I was starting a company, granted I'm like 25 and I had started $0 billion companies. So this means nothing. But like as a founder of something, I'm like, you got to be so present to make sure that culture is getting like pushed out and involving people in the culture and like working to loop them in. And then you have to be, I would think that you have to be very choosy about your leadership and about like, because like the more layers you have between, your executives and like your people on the ground, the harder it is to maintain. So you have to be choosy about like, can this person actually uphold the things that we think are valuable, and then you have to like keep pushing it and keep pushing it and keep pushing it and keep pushing it. Again, 25-year-old with $0 billion companies under my belt.
No, I think
So,
there's
like,
something to be said there. Like, in fact, I've heard people that I admire a lot talk about not treating the hiring process as a mutually exclusive thing as it relates to, like, oftentimes when you hear people are like the culture hire, you think of them as like dumb.
Yeah.
It's like, why not hire a culture hire that's also really smart? Like, I think you can find that thing. And now, once again, I'm also in the same boat as Andy. No billion-dollar businesses have been created from me. But, and like maybe, maybe hiring is way, 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 way hard. I mean, I know it's hard. That's why there's a whole industry devoted to it. But I think like that can't be mutually exclusive. It can't be like, you're a good time and you make sense socially and culturally here, but you're not like, I don't think you need to do that.
Yeah.
I think you need to try to find both.
That's what I was. I was definitely like the personality hire. And I'm proud of that role. I am proud of that.
That's why we're the idea guys.
Yeah,
though.
it's needed. I'm an idea guy only.
Yeah, I think you said something too, like being present. I think I would tack on transparency there from leadership. Like, you can be present and be totally like closed, like not available to people, even though you're around. And so I think being around, but also being approachable and transparent also makes a difference. I know that the organizations I've really liked to be a part of have had leadership, even at the highest level, that are available, approachable, and transparent.
Yep. That's actually what you're talking about. There was an article I read in preparation for this it was in the Harvard Business Review. I can't remember the author. Maybe I'll link it. Yeah, I'm just a big HBR guy.
No wonder he's the ideas guy.
But they pointed out some clear things at the beginning of the article that were like, these are typically the things that will set your culture on the wrong course. One of them was transparency.
Like as a bad thing?
Yes, as a bad. Oh no, sorry. As like not having transparency, like can put you in a bad spot. Totally. The other one was clear direction, which I think from our experience has felt very, very true. That like, if I don't feel like we're all rowing towards the same thing, I feel alienated from like the purpose of this company, and I am less likely to contribute or want to contribute to this culture because I feel like I'm not a part of it.
Yeah.
And so like, again, when you're working on something really small, like a team of like, less than 50 people, this is not crazy. Yeah. Like, this is not that hard because typically you're only working on one thing at that point anyway.
Yeah.
But as soon as you get up into the head count of like a couple hundred, it's like, oh, now tons of different people are doing tons of different things. And like, depending on what your product offering looks like you may have many different teams working on many different things. And like, I think it's the executive team's job to help everyone understand, like, here are the goals that we're actually going after. Here's what we're looking to deliver so that I can see the whole picture, regardless of whether or not that's my thing and that's what I'm working on. Like, I want to feel like we're all working towards the same thing, which to me, I'm like, this can't be that hard, but like, I guess, again, no billion-dollar companies, but like maybe it is that hard.
Yeah.
So
I think you need to sell your employees on the direction just as much as you need to sell your customers.
Agreed. Clip that.
If not more. Right? Because like they're the ones that are going to actually do it. And so if there's not, like, if you're not sold, then that symbiotic relationship is broken because you're like, I don't know what I'm contributing towards.
I agree.
Whether it's because you don't believe in it or it's just unclear or you feel like it's unachievable, there's a whole spectrum of reasons why you might not be aligned there.
Yeah.
But I guess, at a company that large, how do you align everybody?
Yeah.
Other than just like, trust me, bro,
Trust.
Trust me, bro.
Trust. Yeah. Anyway,
you have to be data driven.
Yeah, you got to be data driven about it.
Full circle here.
You got to be data driven about it.
Yeah.
All right, we've been going about an hour. We're probably gonna cap it off here. I think we've got some good things to clip. But
sweet.
Any last comments from you before we close up?
No, thanks for watching. If you are watching, it's been fun.
Episode 2, catch us on Spotify. Hopefully, Apple Music coming next per this podcast.
Let's go.
Sounds like we're cutting over to Apple Podcasts. So
do they have podcasts? Yeah. I guess I haven't looked.
They have the podcast app.
Okay, so is that separate?
Apple, interestingly enough, was like the first.
That's true.
It was Apple Podcasts.
Is the term podcast like generic, or was that is this a Bluetooth thing?
Where did podcast come from?
Is this a Bluetooth thing?
Coming next time, more background on why it's called a podcast.
Yeah.
I don't actually know. All right.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys later.